Now, purging through self-induced vomiting is something that anyone can fall into. Is this you? Are you stuck in cycles of purging your food after eating? Is it a destructive secret that leaves you feeling ashamed and alone? And are you wanting to change and stop purging for good? Let's reduce the shame and bring it out in the open. In this podcast, I'm going to explain exactly what you need to do to stop purging. I'm Harriet Frew, and this is the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. I support people to overcome disordered eating and find peace with food, and I've worked as a therapist for 20 plus years in this field and personally recovered myself from bulimia. Do check out my Food Freedom app if you're looking for more support. So let's dive into this episode today. So no one plans to use vomiting as a coping strategy. I know I certainly didn't. Usually it follows a period of being very restrictive with eating. So one day you can't sustain the restriction anymore, you overeat, you binge, you panic, and you find yourself trying to purge. And I know often we think this is going to be one time only, this is a one-off, but before you know it, it's become a daily practice. And then it's wreaking havoc with your health, your bank balance, your well-being. Now, self-induced vomiting is often something as well that is really secretive, and it carries a great deal of shame, and you can feel so alone in dealing with this. Self-induced vomiting is a disordered eating behavior. Now, perhaps that sounds obvious, but sometimes we forget this. You may see vomiting as good, as a means of weight control and emotional regulation. It may have become an ingrained habit. So you've become so used to doing it that you're almost dissociated from the harm that it's actually doing. Now, it's not a healthy coping strategy for your mental and physical health. It is not. And once the purging behavior starts, it can be quite difficult to stop. Self-induced vomiting results in dopamine release, which gives you the same hit that you get from other rewarding activities. And vomiting not only gets rid of food, but it can really bring that sense of relief and calming of the nervous system. Now, obviously, that is not a healthy way to calm your nervous system, but it works short term. Now, how does self-induced vomiting begin? So I think no one plans to start purging, or I think it's very, very rare. Normally, what happens is the precursor is a strict diet. And this is impossible to stick to sustainably. And then one day you end up hungry, eating a lot, it's too much, and there's an understandable consequence, in response to that restriction. And you found yourself eating to the point of being really uncomfortably full. You become very distressed, and then you find yourself trying to get rid of the food in a desperate reaction to that overeating episode. I think when it happened first, it's often a kind of one-off. You never imagined yourself there. But once you've done it once, it's very compelling because it opens the door to a very slippery slope where you might eat more and more food. You can start binging more and more, and the behavior really takes over. And I think initially self-induced vomiting is more about getting rid of food and weight control, but quickly it can become wrapped up in managing difficult emotions and a coping strategy, to give you that relief. Relief from negative emotions, though, is short-lived, and it needs constant repetition to achieve this relief. So it doesn't really work. So vomiting might bring you benefits of stress relief, getting rid of food, but what about the costs? Because there are many. The costs of vomiting are pretty high, particularly when you've been doing it for a long time. Purging causes low potassium levels in the body. And one of the more important functions of potassium is to maintain the electrical activity of the cells in the body. So cells with high electrical activity, for example, nerves and muscles, including the heart, are particularly affected when potassium levels fall. And symptoms of low potassium include things like muscle weakness, muscle aches, muscle cramps, heart palpitations, experienced as an irregular heartbeat. And in rare instances, you can experience heart failure even from low potassium. It can be really quite dangerous. Purging can result in damage to the esophagus, throat, and stomach sphincter, and you might find that you end up vomiting blood. And vomiting regularly also brings stomach acid into your mouth, which results in dental problems. It's common to have regular sore throats as well, and stomach pains after purging, all things that are not very nice. Another thing is puffy cheeks are often seen because of your salivary glands are working overtime to neutralize that stomach acid. Frequent purging as well may also cause issues throughout the digestive system. Many people with disordered eating experience digestive problems, including things like acid reflux and stomach pain. And also your sphincter controlling the esophagus can become weaker. So you get that rumination and food coming up again, which is not very pleasant. You can also experience diarrhea, bloating, constipation, and bloody vomit can also occur if continued retching and vomiting result in a tear of the esophagus. So this is known as a Mallory Weiss tear, and it can cause life-threatening bleeding. Again, quite rare, but not nice. So does vomiting really work? Now, it's not an effective way to manage weight and shape. And research has actually been done which gives differing results on the amount of food that is retained in the stomach after vomiting. Now, I think this is really difficult to actually monitor and really clarify specific amounts because it's different for everybody. But what are your personal costs of self-induced vomiting? Really engage with this. What is purging costing you today? Now, this is not to beat yourself up and self-punish and berate yourself, but it's to engage with the reality of the behavior, because you might have become so desensitized to it that you're just doing it without thinking. It's almost a habit that you don't think about anymore. It's just something that you do. So engage with the costs, okay? Because this will really help your motivation to change. So let's talk about how to stop purging. Now, stopping purging doesn't feel like an easy thing to do. It really doesn't. It can feel quite addictive. It's a habit. And you might feel quite attached to it while also hating it, really being in two minds, which is often common with disordered eating behaviors. Now, if you're binge eating, you might feel that you want to address this first, but I would really suggest work on purging as the first goal, because when you have the option to purge, then binges will always be an option. Okay, they'll be larger in size, more seductive, because you'll always have that escape route through vomiting. So again, there's no right and wrong here. Purging can be stopped more easily. I'm not saying it's easy in the way that you perhaps give up smoking or another compulsive behavior, as you can actually live without purging, okay? It's not a natural thing for your body to do, even though it may feel very natural at the moment. Whereas with binge eating or eating generally, this is going to involve learning to regulate food intake and eating. Okay, so let's talk about some strategies. Number one, set an intention to reduce purging. Get behind this decision with your energy and focus. Okay, that is powerful. Number two, define a manageable and achievable goal. Now, it's important to be underwhelming so it's achievable and gain momentum. So if you're purging a number of times a week, you might want to start just by reducing it really slowly. So if you're purging 10 times a week, maybe reduce it to 9. Now, just do it really incrementally, really slowly, because that will help you build momentum and confidence. So think about your own personal goal. Number 3, how can you really keep on track? So you could log your eating and purging behaviors so you start to develop insight into the triggers. You could even have a financial incentive or something else to reward yourself with to keep yourself on track. So you really need to hold the bigger picture, because you will absolutely be tempted to repeat this old habit again and again. And perhaps you need visual reminders in view to remind you why you're stopping. Number 4, dealing with fullness. Now, this can be a tricky one. So you may be accustomed to either feeling painfully full or having an empty stomach. Now, there are many stages in between, and it may feel quite alien to tolerate those in-between stages. And you might also feel some stomach discomfort or acid reflux. So it can be quite tricky to tolerate this. It's really important. Anxiety about fullness, though, will rise and then fall again. So it's about learning to tolerate the feeling without resorting to the old safety behavior of vomiting. So you may have to set yourself a timer. You may have to actively distract yourself for an hour. It can be really quite hard, but, just to get through it. Number 5, delay vomiting first if stopping altogether feels too much initially. So if it feels too much, a first step can be delaying vomiting. So what's your normal time gap between eating and being sick? Can you start to delay this little by little? Now, this may be very hard to do after you've had a huge binge. However, for a smaller binge or just eating to fullness, you can learn to begin to tolerate this more. Okay, delay little by little. Okay. Number 6, engage with the reality of what you're doing. So really create that connection and reality check with what you're doing. It puts a pause and point of reflection into the habit. Now, this can be the first point of change as you're increasing your awareness. Now, this really helped me in my own recovery because I really started to see vomiting as such a punishing, horrible behavior to do to myself. And the more I engaged with that, I just didn't want to do it anymore. Okay. And that really helped emotionally to help me to reduce it. Number 7, work on your mindset. So we have 60,000 plus thoughts per day. Many thoughts are repetitive. If feeling full evokes anxious thoughts of terror, you need to start thinking about this differently and reframing this. So if you think that just that one purge doesn't matter, how can you reframe this? What would you say to a friend? How would you like to think about this? How can you really start to shift those thoughts? Okay, so some final thoughts. So reducing self-induced vomiting can feel hugely challenging, but it's absolutely possible. I lived with bulimia for nearly a decade and was frequently purging. I haven't purged now in 25 years. So this is possible for you too. Now, the only way out is through. It is tough. You will need to learn to tolerate the anxiety and ride the fullness and, get through it. Distracting yourself to ride out the wave, and remember that you are overcoming a destructive behavior and that you will get through this. You can do it, okay? You can handle it. And not purging will feel unbearable at times. And you will need to think about how you manage this time with distraction, calling a friend, doing something else, staying really committed to your goals. The anxiety about purging will rise and fall. It's learning to live with and tolerate this. The urge to purge will reduce if you reduce the frequency of binge eating or overeating as well. Now, to avoid binging in the first place, you need to aim to stabilize your body's physiology. And this is achieved through eating regularly, eating enough, eating balanced meals, etc. Because undereating leads to starvation and then often binge eating. And then it's really hard because if we binge, we want to purge. So you need to interrupt this cycle. Another thing is holding your weight at a place where your body is happy is also important. I know for me, when I was underweight, I literally felt addicted to food, addicted to sugar. The binge purge cycle felt wildly out of control. When I weight restored and established more regular eating, this absolutely interrupted the cycle and diluted its intensity. And I was then able to work on emotional triggers far more easily. And this was almost impossible when I was constantly hungry and starving. When you're in that starved state, it's very, very hard to interrupt it. So in recovery, stopping purging won't just stop binges overnight, but again, the volume and frequency and urgency of binges will reduce. In my own recovery, I got to the point where I knew I just couldn't purge. I just would put that barrier up. Even once, because I knew even if I thought about it, it would send me back down the slippery slope. So even if I was tempted, I would think, okay, well, what's the worst thing that can happen if I don't purge? Okay, maybe I'm going to gain a couple of pounds of water weight. Maybe I'm going to feel bloated. I'm going to feel a bit yucky for some hours. But ultimately, holding fast to my commitment not to purge was an absolute kind of cornerstone in my recovery. It was a defining moment of change for me. Like I really felt I took a different path. Now, this is possible for you too. Do you struggle with purging? Or did you used to, and perhaps you've overcome this? Now, if so, do share what worked for you in the comments. I would love to hear. Do subscribe if you're on YouTube. Thank you so much for being here. If you are listening to an audio, please follow, rate, and review the Eating Disorder Therapist podcast. Helps it reach more listeners. So thank you so much. Really appreciate you being here. Do follow me on Instagram. Do check out my Food Freedom app if you're looking for more support. And I look forward to sharing another episode with you very soon. Bye.